This program will inform and educate viewers on the underlying reasons behind many of today's grim and troubling events. You know what makes you mad? You know that there are bad things coming just over the horizon. You watch and listen to lots of podcasts and blogs that give their opinions on what's wrong and what's to come. But nobody is talking about what comes next after SHTF. And
am I live? Here I am. Hey, dudes and dudettes, it's me, Uncle Herby. Welcome to another week of the Radical Reset, a Radical Reset. And this week we're going to talk about something very, very important. But before I go on to do that, let me just thank Pure 5 Extractions, who sponsors this show. And thank you very much, Pure 5 Extractions. Okay. Eric, you're here?
Yes, I'm here.
Groovy. Let's get started. I'm not going to talk about politics well, I guess I am, because healthcare is a political issue, but I'm not going to talk about politics per se. Okay. I'm going to talk about how we got into this mess and the actual, well, I don't want to use the word solution. As Thomas Sowell says, my absolute favorite living American, my hero, he says there are no solutions, there are only trade-offs. So what I'm going to discuss today is how we got into the mess we got into, and I'm going to discuss a different set of trade-offs. Let's put it to you that way. There's no such thing as a perfect plan. In fact, I'm not going to present a plan. I'm going to present a course of action to fix this thing once and for all. The problem with a plan is, number one, it'll never turn out the way you plan it. I don't know about you, Eric, but have you ever had a plan in your life that you've made turn out the way you plan it? It's always, ever? Really? Seriously? Well, yeah, I mean, we could plan to go fishing this afternoon, and that would probably come off all right, but we wouldn't know if we'd catch fish. You know what I mean? Plans go the way plans are going to go. But by the way, I am going fishing this afternoon, hence why I use that. But anyway, those of you who are watching this from colder places, it is going to be 72 and sunny here in Phoenix today. Not to make you feel bad, but I'm enjoying myself. This is the time of year. Yeah. When the rest of the world's enjoying their summer, we're absolutely incinerating down here. And while the rest of the world is freezing their tuchus off, we're having a great winter, aren't we?
Yes, we are. And almost breaking records. It's so warm.
It's so nice. It is so nice. Okay, let's talk about how we got here. The reason I want to talk about this, by the way, is this disgusting justification for shooting the poor man who was the head of United Healthcare, even though the shooter didn't have United Healthcare. And by the way, I want to make this clear. I do not have United Healthcare. Just to make it clear for the record, I am not and have never been a client of United Healthcare. I'm not here to apologize for any company. My age, I'm 67, so I'm on Medicare. I'm going to talk about Medicare quite a bit. And I also have a private Medicare supplement through a company called MedMutual. And I chose that because it lets me go to any doctor I want. Now that that's out of the way, let's talk about how we got into this disastrous mess we're in and why everyone's mad at the wrong things. I heard Elizabeth Warren this week blaming the insurance companies as if, well, let's start at the beginning. Just like I said, let's get basic. This is going to be the only podcast you will ever see that's going to lay it out for you in a way that you're going to understand. Please share this with friends, because when you get into the discussion, I should have muted my phone. There it goes. Okay. That happened to be my oldest and dearest friend, who's a doctor, who would not, we've talked about this. He does not love the solution I'm about to present, but that's the way it goes. It's because doctors make a shit ton of money. Let's get involved in whose fault it is. It is not the doctor's fault. It is not the lawyer's fault. It is not the insurance company's fault. It is not the fault of anything except the government. The government is what got us into this mess. Like so many things that we face, this has been done to us by our own government. And weirdly enough, people still keep going like, what's the solution? What's your plan? You know, Donald Trump doesn't have a plan. No shit. There's no plan to have. But let's get that. And by the way, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly today, but everything I'm about to discuss is in the chapter. I know I'm not holding this up right. You know, Eric, one of these days I'm going to learn how to do this.
Lean it in.
I can't hold up my own book. Lean it in?
Yeah. It's because it's black. It's just hard to pick up on there.
Well, this book is called, that I'm holding in my hand, is called A Radical Reset. You can find it on Amazon. I wrote it, and in it is a chapter called Healing Healthcare. And everything I'm about to discuss I'm going to go through it quickly because I don't want to spend hours with you today. But if you want to read the details and the background and see the footnotes and where I came up with what I came up with and how did I source it and so on and so forth, it's all in A Radical Reset, along with let me rephrase that, better trade-offs for everything, including an entirely new political system called anti-politism, a new form of democratic republic based on merit, and where service becomes a duty instead of a career. Okay, now that I've said all that, and you know it's on Amazon, let's get down to business. How we got into this mess was the year to remember. You see behind me, it says the 1964 plan. The reason that we formed the 1964 plan, which is a nonprofit that was formed by myself, Eric, and a couple of other people who are not on, and they haven't given me permission to use their names, so I'm not going to use their names. But we put together this nonprofit, and the reason that we picked the year 1964 was that was the year that the Civil Rights Act was passed, which in my view was the last piece of decent legislation in the history of the United States. If we would have stopped right there, we were at the top of our game. We dominated the world. Our economy was powerful. Everything was going right. And then, of course, we proceeded to screw it up. And screwing up healthcare was part of that. Now, in 1965 was the year when healthcare started to go off the tracks. Prior to 1965, 1964 and before, there was no health insurance crisis in the United States. There was no healthcare crisis in the United States. This is something that we have brought on ourselves since 1965 and the creation of Medicare and Medicaid. Now, before I go on to Medicare and Medicaid, you have to understand a very simple thing. There's a kind of accountant called an actuary, and where your accountant or your CPA is there to help you figure out how to pay taxes, reduce taxes, so on and so forth, about things you've already done. An actuary is a predictor. They're an accountant that uses the math, frankly, and statistics to predict outcomes. And insurance companies use actuaries to help determine premiums. And it's called actuarial tables, and it's about life expectancy and the probability of certain things happening. So, for example, in my group, let's call it the over 65 group, we are the most expensive group to insure. This is why Medicare came into being, because if I were paying what it really costs to insure me, just to give you an example, at my age, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. I know that's true of everybody, but when is 40 years off and you're in your 20s, it's much different than when is, you're 67. Already, I have 2 titanium shoulders, and I've had the bottom lobe of the lung removed for a tumor. I'm fine, by the way. No chemo, no radiation. I'm fine. But I'll give you an idea. At the Mayo Clinic where I had this done, my total bills are about $170,000, of which I owe nothing. And that's because of Medicare and my supplements. So let me explain how Medicare came about. Those of you who have bought health insurance now, Eric, you probably know this. If you go out to buy health insurance and you're in your 30s, you're looking at $400, $500, $600 a month for decent health care. And if your company's paying it on your behalf, that's what they're paying on your behalf. And that's based on the probability of you making a claim, the cost of processing that claim, a small profit for the insurance company, and to reserve enough money. All insurance is a whole bunch of people paying into a big pool. And then when someone in that pool gets sick, all the other healthy people who aren't sick, their money helps pay for the bill of the person that gets sick. And where premiums are determined by how many people in that group are going to get sick, how sick are they going to be, and then as a result of that, what's it going to cost to insure them? That's it. So obviously, when you look at people my age, the cost of insurance, if I was paying what it really costs to insure me, I'd probably be paying $1,200, $1,300, $1,400, $1,500 a month at least, and maybe more. So since most senior citizens can't afford that, what happened in 1965 was Congress came up with the idea of, well, not Congress, the Johnson administration, then passed by Congress, for Medicare and Medicaid. Medicaid is Medicare for poor people, but we'll get into that in just a second. So the way Medicare works is there are 2 parts, Part A and Part B. Part A is the hospital part. Part B is the doctor part. I'm being simplistic. I know there are those of you who are going to start writing me things. I'm doing this in brief overview. The details are in A Radical Reset available on Amazon. But The idea here is between Medicare was let the government pick up the bulk of the insurance costs. So in Part A, the government pays everything. So when I went to Mayo Clinic and I spent the night and I had my lung operated on and so on and so forth, that was all paid under Part A of Medicare. Part B of Medicare, the doctor's charges, there's a deductible. Now, back in 1965, the deductible was set at $100. Today, I want to say it's around $240, which is not even close to what it would be if it was really adjusted for inflation. But that's neither here nor there. There's a small deductible, meaning a small amount of money that I have to pay out of my pocket. And then after that, Medicare pays 80% of my doctor's bills, and my Medicare supplement pays the other 20%. Now, for Medicare Part B, I do pay a premium. Medicare Part A is free. Medicare Part B, you have to pay for, and you elect it. So almost everybody elects it, and I'm paying, I want to say, $185 a month, give or take a nickel, for Medicare Part B, which for a man my age is unbelievably cheap. And where that money's coming from is, of course, the trust fund that the government set up. Now, Medicare is great. Okay, it doesn't pay everything, but it's great. And for the money that you spend for it, for $185, it's unbelievable. I mean, how do I run up basically $250,000 worth of bills and know nothing? Medicare. And the $185 comes out of my Social Security check every month. I don't even notice it. And I pay $169 to MedMutual for the Medicare supplement. So between the two, I'm looking at about $350 a month. And that is a fraction of what I would have to pay if I was buying the insurance privately. Medicaid is very, very similar, although there's no Part A and Part B. It just covers everything. And it covers people who financially, for one reason or another, can't afford health insurance. Now, the problem, before I get into the problem, Medicare and Medicaid worked really well, and they were really popular right out of the gate. And if there's one thing politicians love, is when something they do is very popular. And people really grew to love it. Now, prior to Medicare and prior to the advent of all this, prior to 1965, there was lots of places to buy health insurance, and there was a lot of variations of health insurance. There were hundreds and hundreds of companies selling insurance policies to people of every age, and some of them covered a lot, and some of them covered a little, and some of them covered in the hospital, and not. It was a free market in health insurance. But the most important thing to remember was prior to 1965, you and I, the patient, was the customer. So I'll give you an example. When I was 11 years old, this was 1968, so it's only 3 years into it. It was still early in the process. My appendix had to be removed. My parents paid for that out of pocket, and it wasn't very much. I had to spend a couple of nights in the hospital because I got very sick. I won't go into the whole story, but long story short, I was at Children's Hospital in Pittsburgh. I had the surgery done there. Obviously, I'm fine. And the bills came to, I remember, about a total of $1,100. That's all it cost. That included the surgeon and the operating room and a night in the hospital. And there you are. Now, how has it gotten so out of hand? We're not the customer anymore. And I'll explain how that is as we get into this. Now, Medicare was so popular that what happened is politicians across the country in every state decided to start using Medicare as the template against which they would pass laws forcing insurance companies to cover things the exact same way Medicare did. So where before, I'll give you a good example. Obviously, me, a 67-year-old man, myself, if I were to marry a woman, I'd probably marry a woman appropriate to my age, and we wouldn't be planning to have any children. So why would we buy pregnancy coverage, for example, in our health insurance? So prior to 1965, pregnancy coverage was something that you paid for if you wanted it. It was kind of like ordering a la carte off a menu in a restaurant. So if you weren't going to use it, if you never planned to have children, if you couldn't have children, then you didn't need to pay for it, and you didn't choose that. Today, pregnancy is covered as any other illness. Why is pregnancy covered like any other illness? Because laws have been passed in every state in the country, making that the law of the land. That means I'm paying for that, and people like me are paying for that, and you're paying for that if you're not of childbearing age, even though you're not going to ever use it. Okay, all this, every time they add a benefit, they add a cost. Okay, now what they did in the beginning, and again, I'm being very simplistic, as you add all of these free benefits, they're not really free. And obviously the premium on insurance would have to change to reflect these benefits they're adding. Like I'll give you an example. In Washington State, and I think it's still true, they have to pay for toupees. Um, hard to believe, but that again, there's some states chiropractic is covered like anything else. I have nothing against chiropractors, but I don't use them. Maybe you don't either. Why would you be paying a premium that includes chiropractic coverage if you're never going to use a chiropractor? Vice versa, if you do want to use a chiropractor, shouldn't you be able to buy that a la carte? Well, under the current rules, because of Medicare and the way everything is structured and the way everything is based on Medicare, it's covered. So all of us pay the premiums for all of these things. So in order to what that did right away, by the way, is a couple of things. Number one is the insurance company has become the customer and the doctors and hospitals are the provider, and we're the patient, which is this strange thing. We have no control over our own healthcare to speak of because we're not the customer, the insurance company is. Now, in order to keep the premiums down with the insurance companies, and I'll get back to that customer concept in a minute, but in order to keep the premiums down, what the government did is pass laws to restrict how much profit an insurance company can make. So when Elizabeth Warren talks about the insurance companies making a lot of money, and when people start saying they're justified to shoot the head of United Healthcare, understand that by law, that company and every company in the health insurance business is restricted to between 1% and 5% profit, and that's it. That's all the profit they make by law. So blaming them is ridiculous. Just like I know a lot of doctors make a lot of money, but again, the system is set up for that. I know the hospitals make a tremendous amount of money, but the system is set up for that. But the problem is when you limit the profit an insurance company can make, most insurance companies left the health insurance business. I don't know if you've noticed that. Eric, did you ever notice that? Do you remember when there used to be tons and tons of insurance companies that could, and now today there's only like 2 or 3? Yeah. I mean, there's hardly any. And that's because by legislating how much the price could be, how much profit they could have, a lot of companies said, "Oh, the hell," because remember that health insurance is a very high claim business. So let me back up from that a little bit. And again, I know I'm going fast. This is all covered in a radical reset. So it's not the big claims like my lung that kills health insurance. It's the little claims that we constantly use. Now, by setting up $100 deductible under Medicare and that becoming the model of every other insurance company, and to this day, most insurances, there's a deductible, then it's 80-20 up to a certain amount, and then 100% thereafter. Obamacare, for example, 80-20 is the 20% is huge. It can be thousands of dollars out of pocket, which is why people are bitching and moaning. But you have to understand that money out of pocket discourages overuse. Okay, so that's a two-edged sword. So when you pass a law that says you have to cover this and this and this, and you can't have a deductible or what's called a stop loss, how much the 20% is, that's lower, then the premium has to reflect that. So in order to make the premiums reflect, they have to make you pay more. But you're not really the patient. The patient's not the customer. The insurance company is. Okay, and how much can be done? That's why they always have to contact the insurance company for permission. That's why they always have to find out how much the insurance company is going to pay. The insurance company is the customer, not you. Okay, not you or me. So there's very few companies. There's Aetna, there's Prudential, very few others in the traditional health insurance business. I don't know them all off the top of my head, but my God, I remember back in the olden days, there were thousands of them. And today there's like 2, 3, 4, not many. So that takes you out of the picture. And since the deductible is so low, and since you have to pay that deductible to get to the part where the insurance company pays for it, well, that's an incentive to spend money as fast as possible, not to save money. Okay, if the idea is once I get past the deductible, they're going to pay 80%, and then maybe you have some supplementary coverage. That's what Aflac's about, by the way. When you see those ads on TV, Aflac, those are policies that pay the other 20% in different ways, whether you're in the hospital or you have an accident. Anyway, I'm not going to get into Aflac's thing. Aflac is not a true health insurance company. They're a supplemental company. But anyway, All these coverages are designed to pick this up and to have you have nothing out of pocket. But if you have nothing out of pocket, then what is your incentive to even ask what anything costs? And I'm as guilty about this as anybody else. When I went in for my surgeries for my shoulder and then later for my lung, I never asked how much it was going to cost because I knew that between Medicare and my supplement, it was going to be taken care of anyway. So I had no incentive to ask. I had no incentive to negotiate. I had no incentive to do anything but simply be there because that's what the patient is. The patient is the body upon which all these professionals are working, but we have no control over the cost because we're not the ones paying for it. Now, in order to control costs, the idea came around later on for health maintenance organizations, HMOs, or preferred provider organizations, PPOs. These are plays on the same thing and they have the same weakness. So HMOs and PPOs work, you go within the network that your doctor belongs to in your hospital. And within that network, there's no 80/20s. Everything is, you pay like $20 for an office visit and hospitals are covered. But again, there's no incentive to reduce the amount of care. Consequently, the insurance companies having to process thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of claims for all these different doctors putting in all these different orders for all these different illnesses and all these different patients. And the patients have no incentive to control costs because they're only paying either $20 for an office visit, or if they have private insurance, the 80/20 that we talked about. But regardless, the incentive is get past the part where you pay as quickly as possible and get into the part where the insurance company plays. And it doesn't take much imagination to understand that that's going to drive up premium costs. Now, health insurance is the most expensive insurance anyway. And the reason it's the most expensive insurance as compared to, let's say, automobile insurance or homeowners insurance or life insurance is because it's a certainty that it's going to pay. In other words, your car insurance, the odds of you totaling your car as calculated by actuaries, again, these super accountants that predict things, is about 1 in 5,000. About 1 in 5,000 cars will be in an accident that totals it. That doesn't mean you're going to get hurt. A total can be a bent frame. But anything that causes the car to be irreparable is a total. And about 1 in 5,000 cars will be totaled in the course of a year. Your homeowners insurance is very inexpensive. Why is it very inexpensive? Because the odds of your house burning down, a total loss, is about 1 in 100,000. So there's the insurance companies collecting 99,999 little premiums from other homeowners for the one that's going to burn down. And so they have plenty of money to pay that claim as well as make a little bit of profit for themselves. Again, profit is regulated by law. The problem is figures lie and liars figure, like I always tell you. And so it sounds like the insurance company is taking in billions and billions and billions of dollars in premiums and payments, and they are, but that's gross. That means that's before all expenses. But after all the expenses are paid, they typically make 1% to 5% profit, which is very, very low. That's comparable, by the way, to your supermarket, which that same idiot, Elizabeth Warren, blames the grocery store companies who are operating on teeny, tiny little margins. There's just no room to cut. Okay, it's not the profit margin of the insurance company. Now, some people want to blame the lawyers because of all the lawsuits and all the liability, and that's a big part of it. I won't deny that, but that's an easy problem to fix. There are 2 words to fix the lawyer problem: loser pays. In every other industrial country in the world, if you bring a lawsuit and you lose, you have to pay the cost of the person you sued. Except in America. In America, they advertise on TV. You sign up with these guys, they go after the people, they have nothing at risk. And if they collect money, they get typically 30% of it. Depends on the lawyer, up or down. But the bottom line is there's no incentive not to file a lawsuit. Why not? Let's just file a lawsuit and see what happens. Now, if you have loser pays, there'll be a lot less lawsuits because of most of these lawsuits there's a big difference between malpractice and a mistake. Okay. But in our system now, it's not, there's absolutely no way to quantify that. So for example, if your doctor operates on you drunk, that's malpractice. Okay. Thank God my doctor didn't operate on me drunk. It almost never happens. But if the doctor makes a mistake, let's say, I don't know what it could be, prescribes the wrong medication, nicks an artery, does something that's just in a very, very, very delicate procedure, things don't go exactly right. Right now, they could get sued, where in fact, they shouldn't be able to be sued because that's really not malpractice. That's just a mistake. Okay. And the alternative, if you didn't have the surgery, generally when these things happen, is you were going to die. And the fact that you lived through it, but you didn't get a result the way you wanted it, makes you irritated. I understand, but it's not necessarily what's called a tort. You ever hear that word, tort, T-O-R-T? Tort means that you have something to sue for. And if we had loser pays, then there'd be a whole lot less abuse of tort law. So that would help control the cost of insurance. But that's not really the major driver. Okay. The major driver is we are not the patient. I mean, we are not the customer, we're the patient. So there's nobody asking anybody what anything costs. And it's all done incestuously between these very few insurance companies and the big hospital groups and the big doctor groups. And the cost is just spiraling and spiraling because the money to pay for all of this, especially with Obamacare now, is just coming from the government. And so it's subsidizing all of this stupidity and waste. And there's nobody trying to control the cost. Okay. Have I made myself pretty clear, Eric? And are you understanding where we're coming from on this?
I'm following with you. I'm
Okay.
tracking.
Okay. You have to play the part of the audience watching. So as I go through this, so understand that prior to 1965, prior to the government getting involved in health insurance, you would go out and most people would buy what was called in the old days a major medical policy. And a major medical policy had a deductible. It was usually a fairly large deductible because you didn't buy it to cover taking your kids to the doctor when they had the flu or a cold or even a minor broken bone. You bought it for, God forbid, you or your family needed a major surgery, a major treatment, something like that. And because it is the big claims that kills the insurance companies because they plan for that in the actuarial computations. What kills them is the cost of processing those thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of little teeny weeny claims that we all put in because we have no incentive to do anything else but go to the doctor every time, we have a boo-boo. So it's chronically overused. Now let's move to Medicaid for a moment. Medicaid for the poor people is great. Okay, I don't know if you guys have ever known anybody that's been on Medicaid. Here in Arizona, we don't actually have Medicaid. We have our own version of it called Access. It's really pretty much the same thing. People on Access that I know here in Arizona go to exactly the same doctors that private insurance companies do, go to exactly the same hospitals, get exactly the same. It's excellent. Okay, everyone. And when I came out of the clink way back when I made the huge mistake of my life, I knew a lot of guys that went on Access, and Access Care is excellent Medicaid. The problem with Medicaid and Access is that, again, there's no incentive not to spend money. So poor people tend to be grotesque overusers of healthcare because they're paying nothing for Medicaid, not even the $185 a month I pay for Medicare, not even that. They pay nothing. They have no deductible, no 80/20. Medicaid covers everything. Okay. And some doctors don't take it, but the vast majority of doctors do. The vast majority of hospitals do. And you have absolutely no incentive. So every time you feel a little sick, every time you want to basically get off work and malinger, you go down to the emergency room, you sit there, you go through the process, you run up a few $1,000s in bills to find out you're really not all that sick. That all goes, you don't even think about it. It goes off the Medicaid. You shot the day down, yada, yada, yada. Again, grotesquely overutilized. If you don't have, the truth is, if you and I don't have a part to pay, we have no incentive to even begin to control costs. And if the customer, in a free market, the customer controls costs. So those of you who are thinking to yourself right now, what we really need is a single payer system like Canada and like Norway and like Sweden and like France and like Germany and Britain, I want to address that. Again, the patient's not the customer. The state is in this case. When you have a monopoly, okay, on healthcare, the only way to control cost is rationing. Okay, so in other words, if we had private competition between insurance companies, they'd be innovating and coming up with new plans and new ways and new techniques and new treatments and all kinds of innovative ways to control cost. But in a single payer system where there's no competition and there's no there's absolutely nobody to take away the business from you. There is no incentive. It's just like any bureaucracy. It's like healthcare run by the Department of Motor Vehicles. So what happens is, in order to control costs, they ration it. But they don't call it rationing. They call it waiting periods. So I'll give you a good example. I had my shoulders done. To get a shoulder done in the United States, when you need to have it done, you can get it done almost right away. When the last one I had done was my right shoulder. When I needed to get it done, the doctor said, you need it, and I was in surgery within 4 weeks. I had some CAT scans and some x-rays and some preliminaries done, but they started treating me right away. And then I was in for my surgery, and now I'm fully recovered, and I feel great. My arms are great, great result. That was probably oversharing, but the bottom line is I didn't have to wait. If I lived in Canada, my wait would be 2 years. Okay, that is the standard wait for a new shoulder. Now, on a scale of 1 to 10, my shoulder pain was 9 all the time, and occasionally went to 10. I can't even imagine waiting 2 years to get my shoulder replaced. Okay, but that's the way it's done in Canada, which is why here in Phoenix, Arizona, if you go down to the Mayo Clinic, you'll just have to trust me on this. Those of you who live here know this is true. There's a ton of Canadians who come down here and pay out of their own pocket to use private health care in the United States and go to the Mayo Clinic, which is not cheap, okay, to get their care because the national health care in Canada sucks. Okay, it sucks because they have to ration care. I'll give you one more instance. I dated a girl years ago. Her name was Dominique. Dominique had something called ankylosing spondylitis. Dominique was Canadian. She lived in Montreal. So long story short, ankylosing spondylitis is a form of rheumatoid arthritis that strikes primarily young women who are under the age of 30. And if left untreated, by the time they're 30 and older, they'll go blind, ultimately. Now, there is a treatment for ankylosing spondylitis. It's called Enbrel. Okay, you've probably seen, well, maybe you have if you're not a golf fan, but Phil Mickelson, who has rheumatoid arthritis, does ads for Enbrel. Enbrel works, okay? It works on rheumatoid arthritis. It works on ankylosing spondylitis. The problem is it's very expensive, okay? I'll explain why drugs are expensive in just a minute. It's very, very expensive, okay? So Canada simply doesn't offer it. You can't get the treatment. So if Dominique had stayed in Canada and had tried to get the proper care and treatment of Enbrel, okay, in Canada at the time, it may be covered today, but I'm talking, this is some years ago, and there's plenty of other examples. Believe me, I can go through a million. I'm just using one that I personally know about. She would have gone blind. Now, the happy news was she's a book editor. She came down to the United States. She got a job in New York City. She got private health insurance. She got treatment. And today she's fine. We're still friends. But, no, we're not dating. Beautiful girl. Anyway, neither here nor there. So the point is, and this is true all over the world, which is why in every country that has national health insurance, including the Norwegian countries, the Scandinavian countries, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, they all have private alternatives. And almost anyone who has any kind of money at all, in addition to the huge income tax they pay to pay for their health, that's another thing. Unlike us, who's just printing up money because we can. In, for example, Norway, the income tax starts at 56% at the bottom. That's the lowest. In other words, it doesn't matter what you make, you're going to pay at least a little more than half of your income as income tax. And then on top of that, you're going to, where was I going with that? Besides the income tax. Oh, you have to pay a 25% value added tax, which is like a wholesale sales tax. And you don't even get what you pay for, and then you have to go out and buy private insurance. Most of the people in England who can afford it buy private insurance. Most of the people in Germany. Whenever people come up with, we need a plan, Thomas Sowell, back to my hero, says there are 3 questions you should always ask when someone comes up with a new plan. The first question is, as compared to what? So if someone said, we need to have single payer insurance, the first question you have to say is, as compared to what? Where does it actually work? And the answer is nowhere. It doesn't work. I mean, it works. You can get healthcare, but it's inferior. It's not the kind of healthcare that you would expect. It's not the first-rate healthcare that you can get in the United States. For all of our troubles and for all of our costs, it's a simple fact that when anybody gets really sick in the world, truly wealthy people, they fly to the United States because the healthcare anywhere else in comparison sucks. And ours isn't as great as it could be. We'll get into that in just 1 second. So understand, this is where the cost comes from. Now, what can we do about this? How can we fix this problem? Oh, by the way, the second of the 3 questions, the first question is as compared to what? Then what everyone always says is, well, we've learned from all these other systems and we'll do it right. So that brings you to the second question, which is show me your data. And if you don't have any data to prove it, you're just blowing smoke out your ass and you're just making things up, which is what politicians usually do. And even if there is the data, then you get to the third thing is what is this going to cost? And we can't afford what we have, let alone anything new, which is why Trump has absolutely no healthcare plan, and why Biden before him had absolutely no healthcare plan, and why Obamacare sucks and is getting worse by the day, because none of these things work. Because once you take the patient out of the process as the customer, then you have nobody that's going to try to control cost, and you get what you get. So how do we fix this problem? And it's really very, very simple. We do away with all healthcare regulation, and we do away with all restrictions on interstate competition, and we get rid of all regulations that restrict the profit that health insurance companies make, and we adopt loser pays to protect against fraudulent lawsuits, of which there are way, way, way too many, and let the free market work. And what will happen is, like what happens in every other industry that's open, is that hundreds, if not thousands, of companies will begin to compete, offer various plans at various levels that we can all pick a la carte, or our employers can buy on our behalf if we are getting that as a company benefit, but no subsidies. And by doing that, we suddenly become the customer again, because now we're going to have to pay something out of our own pockets, and we're going to be very, very careful about who we do business with. So where today, when you want to like find a pediatrician for your child, you just ask a friend, who do you recommend? And you go to see them. You never for a minute think to ask them what this is going to cost. In the scenario I'm talking about, you would automatically ask, what's this going to cost? Because you're going to pay part of it out of your own pocket, and therefore you have an incentive not to. Now, this, of course, brings us to the two obvious questions, which is, what about poor people and what about old people that we now cover with Medicare and Medicaid? And the answer is simple. It's a one-word answer: vouchers. Okay. Instead of setting up this entire huge conglomerate of mess and all these different programs, and getting people involved, government bureaucrats getting involved designing a health insurance system, they're about as good at doing that as everything else. Have you not learned yet, and I'm sure you have, that basically everything the government touches, it turns to shit? Okay. And the only reason that we have a good national defense is every other country's national defense is full of waste and fraud and everything else. So we happen to be just the best of all of those. But the fact is, there's no such thing as an efficient state industry. There's no such thing as a well-run state industry. There's no such thing as one that you would ever be happy in dealing with. Okay. All they do is throw more money at it and throw more money at it, and we are out of money. So we have to do something about it. So what we do instead is we let the free market come up with whatever they come up with. You go out and get whatever insurance that you want based on your own finances and how much coverage you need, and whether you need pregnancy or you don't need pregnancy, or old people coverage, so on and so forth. And then for those people that can't afford it, you simply give them a vouchers to use to buy the insurance themselves privately. But under no circumstance is there an option for them to use a voucher where they have no deductibles. Even poor people have to pay something out of their pocket. Okay. Otherwise, there's no controlling costs. When you see that, that picture on TV, and you see that sad story about the child who has some rare cancer and they're not getting treatment because the evil insurance company isn't paying for it, and the people have no insurance, and then the television news crew traditionally goes out to where they live and they interview the mother, and she talks about my poor child. And I know I'm going to Southern accent for no reason. I'll kill that. That's discriminatory. My poor child, we don't have health insurance. We weren't able to cover things. It's that goddamn insurance company, blah, blah, blah. The truth is, what they need to do is take a walk around the property and see how many ATVs there are. And if they go inside and see if there's a big screen colored television. In other words, a lot of people are poor because they make shitty decisions that keep them poor. But that doesn't mean that we all need to subsidize that. And that's why, frankly, the voucher should be done at the state level, not the federal level, because the smaller government is, the more efficient it is, hopefully, in enforcing its own rules. So what I'm basically saying is, if for example, if here in Arizona, maybe there would be a sliding scale based on how much your annual income is, and the lower it is, the bigger your voucher is. And with this voucher, so you don't get labeled with, that's a Medicaid patient or that's a Medicare patient. Everybody has their own private health insurance. The doctors and hospitals are not involved in this whatsoever. You're paying for it directly with the voucher, and that eliminates the whole need for bureaucracy, the whole need for the regulatory state. All of that goes away. Now, is this a perfect system? No, it's not. It's not even a system. It's allowing the free market to work. We don't need any systems. System is a dangerous word. It's another word for conforming to a set of regulations that a bunch of bureaucrats lay down who are not necessarily qualified to do what they're doing. Nobody is smart enough. Nobody has yet invented a national healthcare system that hasn't bankrupted the countries they're in. Those of you who are still screaming, the European countries, at least they have it. Germany, as we speak, is in danger of deindustrializing. And a large reason for that and is the tax burden that's been put on their people has created structural deficits that they can't afford. They're not the United States, and they're in big trouble. France is in big trouble. Their unemployment rate is running double digits, and it's permanent at that level because when you take all this money out of the economy to pay for things like national health care, you destroy the ability of private industry to produce new jobs. That's always the price. So there is going to be no perfect outcome. By allowing the free market to do it, here's what we'll get. For 99% of people, you'll get much better care because the insurance companies will have an incentive to treat you like the customer that you are. Instead of having 2 or 3 insurance companies, and this is, like here in Phoenix, you can go to Humana and get in their PPO or their HMO, or you can go to Aetna or Blue Cross and Blue Shield, and that's about it. There's just not a whole lot of other places to go. There's probably some others, but not Prudential, but not too many. Under the scenario I'm talking about, there'll be 1,000 of them, and they'll all be competing for your business. And you'll be able to go online and do your research and decide what it is you want to buy. And if depending on how poor you are, you'll have a voucher that'll pay the majority, if you need it, of the premium. Okay, but not 100% of your costs, because there must be a cost for the patient when the patient goes in to take treatment to stop people from just going to the doctor every time they have a cold. Most of the time when you have a cold, all the doctor's going to tell you to do is get a lot of rest, drink a lot of fluids, and hang out till it passes. Well, right now today, if you're on Medicaid, you might as well go down to the emergency room and see if they'll give you any drugs. But if you're paying for it out of your own pocket, then you're not going to do that. And if you're not going to do that, you're not going to overutilize. And if you don't overutilize, the system saves a fortune. And if the system saves a fortune, the premiums stay lower. Everybody benefits when there is cost control. And the only people that can control cost, for example, here's what would happen under the scenario I'm suggesting. Let's say that my granddaughter needed a tonsillectomy, not an emergency, she just needs a tonsillectomy. And my son and his wife in this scenario would simply call up a doctor and say, what are you going to charge to perform a tonsillectomy? And the doctor would name a number. And if the number is too high, then my son and his wife would have an option to go to a different doctor and say, well, Dr. Smith, Dr. Jones over here is charging, different. Now, not everything is price. There are Mercedes and then there are Chevys, there are things in between. So people will pay for what they want. Most people will be fine with the Chevy, but there'll be those people that want to spend the extra money for the Mercedes-Benz or the Rolls-Royce, and that's fine. Again, it's a free market. When you're paying for it out of your own pocket, you're the customer. When you're the customer, you control the cost because you can always leave. It takes away the monopoly. The whole thing that makes every transaction within it is voluntary. Voluntary. Okay, you're not coerced like you are now. Okay, that for example, most of you watching me belong to some form of HMO or PPO. You must go within the network. You must use the hospitals they recommend. You must accept if they turn down care, it's because they're rationing, frankly, because again, in a network like an HMO, all you're doing is you're paying single payer healthcare plan. You're like paying to be abused, which I don't understand that at all, but people do it. And HMOs are one of those things that sound great until you use them and then they suck because you realize you can't go. For example, I could not have gone to Mayo had I belonged to an HMO. Mayo does not participate in any HMOs. I would much rather pay the money, and I do, for private insurance so I can go to see anyone I want. That's why in Medicare there's Plan A and Plan B and Plan C but all of that is stuff created by bureaucrats who don't know the first thing about insurance, don't know the first thing about healthcare. So what I'm basically saying is, let's let the free market do it and give vouchers to the poor people and the old people to offset the cost. One more thing, in addition to all of that, we have to do something about. Oh God, I lost my train of thought. Eric, I just brain farted out. I was having such a good time. I just thought of this wonderful idea that I had. What else did I want to do? I think I've covered enough. What are we doing? Oh, big pharma. Big pharma. That's what I wanted to talk. Thank you, Eric. Thank you very much. Let's talk about drugs and drug costs. The true statistic is for every drug approved, 99 have been disapproved. And that's a low estimate. In other words, in those labs of Pfizer and Merck and all the big drug companies, they're constantly innovating, trying to come up with new kinds of drugs to treat various things. Okay. Now, that costs money. And most drugs, 99% of the time, fail. And they fail because of FDA regulation, which I hopefully Bobby Kennedy will do a good job cleaning up, HHS and the new guy who's heading FDA and so on and so forth. But even then, they're just tweaking on the edges. There shouldn't be this kind of thing. And it costs drug companies a fortune to develop one new drug. So what they have to do to offset the cost of development, since they know that 99% of the time, most of what they're developing is going to end up in the toilet, is they have to charge for the things they are selling a lot of. And so since in the United States, the reason drugs are more expensive here is that in other countries, their national health care has put ceilings on how much they can pay. So in order to cover people, for sure humanitarian reasons, places where the costs are controlled, we Americans really get stuck with it because of the stupid system that we have and the way it's all done. And there's an easy fix for all this, okay? The reason that drug companies have to do all this and have to charge all this, that's why, for example, insulin is expensive. Insulin is actually cheap to make. It's expensive because they have to make a big profit on insulin because they know they're going to sell insulin for the research on the rare cancer that, God forbid, one of your family members gets, and that the treatment is this really obscure treatment that was developed, but it was developed with the profits that they made on insulin. Am I clear on that, Eric? Am I being clear on that?
Yeah, you are, absolutely. And I wanted to
Okay.
chime in, if I could, on one thing.
Go ahead.
I was really surprised when went to Mexico and said, "Oh my God, the pharmaceutical cost is like $3 for a product that's like 45 in the U.S."
Yeah, that's because in the U.S. they have insurance companies are mandated to cover the cost of whatever it is, so they can sell the other drugs around the world for what the costs really are. So the Mexican people are getting an advantage. By the way, that's fine. And plenty of Americans that I know go down to Nogales here in Arizona or cross to Tijuana in Southern California or wherever you might be and go into Mexico and buy their drugs. But why should you have to do that? It just seems stupid. And if drugs, here's how you solve the whole drug cost thing. Number one, get rid of the FDA. Okay, that's number one, and prescriptions. Now, does that understand this? Okay. Companies do not stay in business by killing or harming their customers. You don't need a regulator to protect you from what a drug company is doing, as long as there are laws requiring disclosure of what the potential side effects are, disclosure of whether it's an experimental drug, and then leave it up to you to decide if you want to try it or not. So, number one, a lot of illnesses where there are promising treatments that are still in testing, and let's say you have terminal lung cancer instead of like being lucky like me, and you're in real trouble, and most organ cancers, frankly, when you find out you have them, it's because I got so lucky when they found the lung tumor because they found it doing a CAT scan for my shoulder. I just lucked out. But if they hadn't, that thing would have sat there for years and grown and grown and grown. And by the time I felt any symptoms from it, I would have been in stage 3 or stage 4. And if you are stage 3 or 4 of an organ cancer, lung, kidney, liver, pancreas, you're a dead man walking. It really, it's just, they can lengthen your life, but not for very long. Here's the bottom line. The problem is patenting. Okay, so patents run out. So an insurance company, like when Pfizer developed, I'll use a much more pleasant drug than cancer, Viagra. Okay, Viagra I don't know if it's Pfizer or Merck. Do you know which one it is, Eric, that makes Viagra?
No, I'm not sure.
I don't even know. It's not important. When the drug companies making Viagra made a shit ton of money when they had control of it, and there were no generic alternatives because they had a patent. But the patent has run out. And now you can go like on that, you've seen that ad on TV for Hims, and you can order the little blue pill that's really a generic sildenafil pill. I think that's the name of the drug generically. And you can now buy, that means the profit is out for the name brand, right? Because why would you spend the big money, like it used to be $30, $40, $50 a pill for Viagra, when you can buy the cheap stuff for Hims and it's exactly the same thing. Well, what if instead of having patents like we do on inventions for drugs, what if we changed it to a royalty system like there is on music? So, for example, it was Pfizer. Thank you very much, Eric. I appreciate that. So instead of Pfizer having to make their money in 7 years, I think that's what it is, 7 years or 8 years. Instead, they get a royalty forever. If you invent the drug that works and you're selling it, you forever and ever and ever, whoever else makes that drug, you get a lick of the ice cream cone. Whoever, it's just like when, if you, again, I'm using an older model, and today with the internet, I don't know what the model is I'm using, but it used to be that and I think it still is, when an artist composes a song, they own that song forever. And every time that song is played anywhere in the world on the radio or in any other source, they get a little fraction of a penny. Well, if the song is a big song, I'll give you a good example of one I really know. Years ago, I knew the drummer for the Animals. Okay. Now, the Animals, for those of you who don't know who that was, they did that song, There Is in New Orleans. There is a house in New Orleans they call the Rising Sun. Do you know that song, Eric, The Rising Sun?
No, but I was going to bring in another royalty. Doesn't the NFL charge to use their logo on clothing apparel?
Sure. Yeah, of course. And if you use it without their control, you're violating all. I'm saying the same thing for drugs. Okay, instead of making them try to make their money back in 7 years, make it so they get a royalty forever. So if an Indian company, let's say, wants to produce generic Viagra in India and ship it to the United States and yada, 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 or one in the United States does it, fine, as long as you're paying the royalty to Pfizer. So now their financial planning changes. And instead of trying to front end load their profits and charge a lot of money for the pills so they can get their profits out in the first 7 years because of that 99-to-1 ratio that most of them fail, now they can look at it as an income source forever. Okay, just like the reason I brought up the House of the Rising Sun, the drummer of the Animals, and they did a lot of songs, but they were all a bunch of drug addicts back in the day. This is a true story. So when they came out with Rising Sun, which is one of the biggest songs ever done in the rock genre, still to this day, the only guy that wasn't doing heroin was the drummer. So the drummer, when the manager came to sign for who wrote the song, he meant to get everybody's signature, but only the drummer. Anyway, to make a long story short, today I know for a fact this drummer lives in Studio City, California, and he gets about $750,000 a year just on the royalties from that one song. It's a tiny fraction of one, but every time it's played anywhere in the world, he's getting paid. That's how drugs should work. Okay, and by doing that, they don't have to front end load. Am I making that clear, Eric?
Yeah, you are. Yeah.
Okay, it's a simple solution. It's a simple solution. It just requires a change in patent. So instead of making it that the drugs are Ozempic, that's another good one. Yeah, Ozempic costs a lot of money now, but what if Novodysk or whatever that company is that's making it just said, okay, we're going to license it out and told you what the risks are. You know, for example, Ozempic only works to a certain point and then stops working and there's side effects. But you know what? You're an adult. You know, basically, if you're over 18 and you're able to read, you can make your own decisions whether you want to use something or you don't. We have to get out of the habit of trying to live everybody's life for them. If somebody wants to try something or do something, why shouldn't they be able to? And by making everything so restrictive and going through the FDA and the approval processes, all of this bureaucracy is adding cost on. And the fact of the matter is that if Novodysk or North, whatever the company is, or Pfizer or Merck or whatever, produced a bad drug with the internet, everybody would know it in about 30 seconds and they'd be out of business. You don't need to regulate. It's just like if you own a restaurant chain, you don't want to poison your customers or you won't have a restaurant chain very soon. You know what I mean? There's no incentive in private business, private industry does a much better job regulating itself than the government could ever do. All of these departments that do all this regulation, all they do is adding costs. Okay, so let me sum up and we'll wrap it up for today because I know I'm going on an hour of this and it's a long time. Again, remember, all you have to do is go to Amazon and buy a copy of this book, A Radical Reset, The Anti-Politics Manifesto. And in it, there's a chapter on healthcare called Healing Healthcare, and it covers everything I'm covering, but in much better detail, much less disjointed, much less trying to fit it into a 1 hour time frame. Pick it up and check it out. But the bottom line is this: do away with Medicare, do away with Medicaid, do away with Obamacare, do away with all health insurance regulation, introduce loser pays on lawsuits, get rid of patent law on drugs and change it for royalties, and suddenly the cost of insurance will plummet because that's what competition does. Most things get cheaper. Oh, there was one more thing I wanted to cover. It just came to me. The supply of doctors in the American Medical Association. The American Medical Association has not authorized a new medical school in this country for decades and decades. And the reason for that is they're trying to control the supply of doctors, because if there was more doctors, of course, there would be more competition. And if there was more competition, they would then, of course, have to charge less. And then maybe they wouldn't make $450,000 a year on average, which is what the average specialist makes. Maybe they'd make only $250,000 only. Okay, here's the thing. We need more doctors, and we need more nurses, and we need more healthcare professionals. And you don't have to be a straight A student to be a good doctor. You have to be a smart person who is empathetic and has some people skills. And we could have a lot more doctors. And if we had a lot more doctors, there'd be a lot less cost. Think about it. So the way to do that is not to say, to medical schools, you have to create one. Just stop restricting. If someone wants to open a medical school, let them open a medical school. Let every university in the country that wants a medical school open a medical school. Let independent medical schools open up. Still have licensing and boards and make sure these people are competent. But at the very same time, why are we restricting the supply of something that costs so damn much? Okay, I think I've covered everything. Read the book. Think what else do I need to cover, Eric? Have I covered the health insurance thing fairly well?
I think you did a great job breaking it down.
I did do. What you said? Did I do a great job or a shitty job? I didn't hear.
Oh, it's great. Great.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't think people have really understood what's going on. Okay, so stop blaming the doctors and stop blaming the lawyers and stop. It's the government. As usual, it's the government. Get the government out of the way. Let the market work. Give vouchers to poor people and old people, and the whole thing will take care of itself. And without a huge bureaucracy, and it won't become a major cost in everybody's life. And that's all there is to it. So I hope you enjoyed today's show. I think I've covered a lot of ground. I hope I didn't talk too fast, because I was trying to squeeze a lot into as little time as possible. And I know I went long as it is. But again, pick up a copy of the book. Thank you again to Pure 5 Extractions for sponsoring the show. Thanks, Eric, for being there and acting as the audience and reminding me when my mind goes wandering off into la la land, as it so often does. Thank you for joining me this week. And remember, share, if you don't share any other show, share this one, because as you just found out, I'm actually explaining why we're in the mess we're in, and nobody else ever does. I know that's an arrogant thing to say, but I've never seen it. So listen, if I'm wrong, let me know. Otherwise, share, like, subscribe, yada, yada, yada. And until next time, and until next week, have a beautiful week, and peace out.
Ready to take your craft to the next level? Imagine faster extractions, purer products, and more profits. Sounds good, right? At Pure 5 Extraction, we've revolutionized cannabis extraction with our game-changing technology. No solvents, no heat, just the cleanest, most natural process on the market. Whether you're a boutique grower or a large-scale operation, Pure 5 has the tools to elevate your business worldwide. Visit pure5extraction.com today. Pure 5 Extraction, because your plants deserve the best.
Ugh, this air conditioner isn't working again. I'm roasting in here.
Hi there. I'm from Canaloo Air. I'm here to fix your air conditioner.
Canaloo Air is a family-owned HVAC company that specializes in residential air conditioning and heating. We offer a variety of services, including installation, replacement, repair, and maintenance. Canaloo Air. We keep your home comfortable all year round. Call us today for a free quote. Why Canaloo Air? Here are the top 5 reasons. Family-owned and operated. We are committed to high-quality service. Our technicians use the highest quality parts and equipment. The business is a member of the Home Advisor Elite Service Award program. And finally, we have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. Visit our website, canilooair.com, or call us today, 602-609-3480, to schedule an appointment.